My wife wanted an open marriage until I handed her divorce papers. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. She smiled, applying her favorite lipstick for her date, until I slid the heavy manila envelope across the kitchen counter. The satisfying smack of the thick paper hitting the granite echoed in the foyer of our comfortable, modern suburban home. My name is Mark. I am 34 years old, and for the last 5 years, I believed I was married to my absolute soulmate. I am a loyal, observant man who has always valued traditional commitment and mutual respect above everything else. I worked hard to provide a beautiful life for my wife, Chloe, who is 32 and deeply obsessed with her public image and social media perception. I loved this woman with every fiber of my being. I would have crossed oceans for her, and I trusted her completely. But the woman standing in front of me, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror and vibrating with excitement to go sleep with another man, was not the woman I married. She was a master manipulator who thought she had successfully completely outsmarted me. Have you ever looked at the person you love and realized you were staring at a complete stranger? That is exactly how I felt watching Chloe adjust her designer dress, completely oblivious to the legal landmine I had just placed in front of her. For months, I had sensed a subtle shift in our dynamic, a coldness that crept into our home like a slow leak. But I always rationalized it, blaming work stress or the natural lulls of a long-term relationship. I never in a million years imagined the horrifying truth of what she was actually doing behind my back. She thought she had orchestrated the perfect crime. She had used modern therapy speak and intense emotional coercion to convince me to open our marriage. Also, she could finally sleep with her arrogant coworker without feeling any of the associated guilt. She thought she got to keep her comfortable suburban lifestyle, her financial safety net, and her loyal husband, while simultaneously enjoying the thrill of a newly sanctioned affair. But she had grossly underestimated how observant I actually am. I had spent the last 3 weeks quietly untangling our entire lives, methodical step by methodical step. I secured my assets, gathered irrefutable evidence, and hired a ruthless lawyer. I was not about to be a supporting character in her twisted journey of self-discovery. She thought this envelope contained hotel confirmations and romantic itineraries for her little weekend getaway. She had no idea her perfect little world was about to completely shatter into pieces. To fully grasp the absolute insanity of this moment, we have to rewind to 3 weeks ago. It was a normal Tuesday evening. We were sitting at a trendy, dimly lit coffee shop downtown, a place Chloe usually reserved for discussing big life plans like vacations or home renovations. I was drinking a cappuccino, completely relaxed, thinking we were going to talk about upgrading our kitchen appliances. Instead, Chloe reached across the small wooden table, gently took my hand, and dropped a massive emotional bomb that instantly blew my entire reality to pieces. She looked me dead in the eyes, her expression completely serious, and calmly stated that she felt stifled by the traditional constraints of our relationship. She pitched the idea of an open marriage as if she were suggesting a new diet or a fun weekend hobby. I honestly thought she was joking at first. I let out a nervous laugh, waiting for the punchline, but her face remained stone cold. She started unleashing a relentless barrage of modern therapy buzzwords that she had clearly rehearsed. She talked about her desperate need for personal growth, ethical non-monogamy, and exploring her authentic self outside the rigid boundaries of traditional matrimony. She claimed that human beings were simply not biologically wired to be with just one person for their entire lives, and that opening our marriage would actually bring us closer together. I sat there in stunned silence, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. The coffee shop ambience faded into a harsh, ringing white noise. My initial reaction was pure shock, rapidly followed by a devastating wave of heartbreak. I had always been entirely faithful to her. I valued our traditional vows and the exclusive intimacy we shared. The mere thought of my wife being physically intimate with another man made me feel physically ill. I pulled my hand away from hers, my mind racing to process the terrifying implications of her request. I asked her point-blank if there was already someone else, if she was unhappy with me, or if I had done something to make her feel so trapped. She immediately became defensive, insisting that this had absolutely nothing to do with me and everything to do with her own journey of self-actualization. But her eyes darted away when she said it. I stared at the woman I married, realizing I did not know her at all. I immediately and firmly refused the idea. I told Chloe in no uncertain terms that an open marriage was a hard boundary for me. I explained that I wanted a monogamous relationship, just like the one we had explicitly agreed to when we stood at the altar 5 years ago. I thought my clear refusal would be the end of the conversation, that she would respect my feelings, and we would work on our connection together. I was incredibly wrong. Instead of accepting my answer, Chloe expertly flipped the script and launched a relentless psychological attack designed to make me question my own sanity. She didn't yell or scream. She just looked at me with this awful, condescending pity, like I was an uneducated child who simply couldn't understand advanced concepts. Over the next few days, our comfortable suburban home turned into an absolute emotional war zone. She constantly bombarded me with articles, podcasts, and social media posts about enlightened couples who had successfully opened their relationships. Whenever I expressed my pain or discomfort, she weaponized her therapy speak against me. She called me controlling, overly traditional, and hopelessly insecure. "You are projecting your own toxic possessiveness onto my autonomy, Mark," she would say, sipping her morning tea like she hadn't just stabbed me in the chest. "If you truly loved me, you would want me to be fully realized and happy. Your refusal to evolve is suffocating this marriage." It was textbook gaslighting, and it was incredibly effective. The emotional toll it took on me was absolutely catastrophic. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and my performance at work completely plummeted. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, genuinely wondering if I was the villain in our relationship. Was I holding her back? Was my desire for a traditional marriage just a toxic manifestation of male insecurity? She had completely systematically dismantled my self-esteem. She made me feel totally inadequate, slowly convincing me that my completely normal desire for fidelity was actually a massive character flaw on my part. I was spiraling into a dark hole of self-doubt, desperately trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Her twisted logic almost convinced me that I was the one destroying our happy marriage. Have you ever looked at the person you love and realized you were staring at a complete stranger? As I struggled through the emotional exhaustion of Chloe's constant gaslighting, a small, rational part of my brain finally started to wake up. Once the initial panic and heartbreak began to subside, I started noticing things. Tiny, subtle shifts in her behavior that didn't align with a woman who was merely curious about theoretical, personal growth. She wasn't acting like a woman seeking freedom. She was acting exactly like a woman who had already found it. Suddenly, her smartphone, which used to be casually tossed on the couch or left on the kitchen counter, became glued to her hand. It was constantly placed face down, and she took it with her everywhere, even into the bathroom when she showered. Then there were the unexplained absences. She started working late at the marketing firm 3 times a week, citing a massive new upcoming project. She was going to the gym at odd hours, but coming home smelling like expensive perfume instead of sweat. And then there was the constant, casual mention of a specific coworker, Julian. Julian was a 35-year-old account executive at her firm, a guy she used to complain about constantly for being arrogant and overly aggressive. Suddenly, Julian was a misunderstood creative genius who just really resonated with her new energy. She talked about him with a bright, unusual sparkle in her eyes that made my stomach completely drop. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to form a terrifying, undeniable picture. I realized that Chloe's sudden, desperate crusade for an open marriage wasn't about exploring a new lifestyle together. It was a highly calculated exit strategy. She was trying to secure a retroactive hall pass. She wanted my explicit permission to sleep with other people so she could completely erase the guilt of whatever she was already doing behind my back. She wanted to keep the beautiful house, the financial stability of my salary, and the social status of our marriage, while having her fun on the side with zero consequences. My sadness rapidly evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating determination. I needed to know exactly what she was hiding behind that locked, glowing phone screen. I realized that directly fighting her was getting me absolutely nowhere. If I kept pushing back with anger and traditional logic, she would just continue to gaslight me, lock down her digital security, and eventually file for a standard divorce where she would likely walk away with half of everything I had worked for. I needed to be much smarter than she was. I needed concrete, undeniable evidence of her betrayal. So, I made the hardest, most disgusting tactical decision of my entire life. I walked into the kitchen, poured us both a glass of wine, and completely changed my tune. I looked her in the eyes, swallowed my immense pride, and told her that I was willing to try. I've been doing a lot of reading. I lied smoothly, keeping my voice soft and measured. And I realized that my initial reaction was based on fear and insecurity. I need some time to process and consider all the boundaries, but I am open to discussing an ethical non-monogamy arrangement if it will save our marriage. The transformation in her demeanor was instantaneous and entirely sickening. Her eyes lit up, a massive, relieved smile spread across her face, and she practically leaped across the kitchen island to hug me. She showered me with praises, telling me how evolved and brave I was for taking this step with her. She completely bought my performance without a single ounce of suspicion. By pretending to give her exactly what she wanted, I intentionally lowered all of her defensive walls. She stopped being so hypervigilant about her schedule, assuming that I was now on board with her modern journey. She thought I was busy reading self-help books and journaling about my feelings, entirely distracted by the illusion of compromise she had built. But in reality, I was watching her every single move like a hawk. I was analyzing her routines, tracking the subtle changes in her habits, and waiting patiently for the inevitable moment she would make a massive, careless mistake. She thought she had won the game, but I was just changing all the rules. With her guard completely down, it did not take long for Chloe to get incredibly sloppy. She was so intoxicated by the thrill of her impending freedom that she stopped paying attention to basic operational security. A few nights later, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie. Her phone was resting on the coffee table between us, face up for the first time in weeks. I wasn't actively trying to snoop in that moment, but then the screen suddenly lit up with a bright, glowing notification. The preview message was highly condensed, but I clearly saw the name Julian followed by a suggestive emoji and a message that simply read, "Thinking about the hotel last week. Can't wait until we don't have to hide." My blood instantly turned to absolute ice in my veins. I didn't react. I kept my eyes completely glued to the television screen, taking slow, deep breaths to prevent my hands from visibly shaking. When the movie ended, Chloe picked up her phone to check her messages. I subtly shifted my angle, pretending to stretch my arms over my head, and watched her thumbs move across the screen. She had changed her passcode 3 weeks ago right before she pitched the open marriage idea. But in her relaxed state, she typed it in slowly and clearly. 1-4-0-9. It was the date of our wedding anniversary. The sheer, twisted irony of her using the date we vowed to be faithful to lock the device she was using to actively betray me was almost too much to comprehend. I burned those 4 digits into my memory, repeating them over and over in my head like a terrifying mantra. I excused myself to use the restroom, splashing freezing cold water onto my flushed face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The confirmation of her affair was no longer a suspicion. It was a rapidly approaching reality. I felt a dangerous mixture of profound grief and absolute, burning rage. But I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I didn't just want a single text message. I wanted the entire timeline. I wanted undeniable proof that would completely destroy her fake narrative of ethical growth. The glowing notification from Julian was the exact spark that finally ignited my absolute rage. I waited until 3 in the morning. I lay perfectly still in our bed, listening to the deep, rhythmic breathing of the woman who was actively destroying my life. When I was absolutely certain she was in a deep sleep, I slowly slipped out from under the heavy duvet. I crept down the dark hallway into the living room, retrieved her smartphone from her designer purse, and sat down at the kitchen counter in complete darkness. My heart was hammering so violently against my ribcage that I thought it might actually wake her up. I took a deep, shaky breath, activated the screen, and carefully typed in the 4-digit passcode. 1-4-0-9. The phone instantly unlocked, granting me full access to her entire digital life. I went straight to her primary text messages. There was a thread with Julian, but it was surprisingly mundane. Just complaints about office politics and links to funny articles. It didn't match the notification I had seen earlier. She was smart, but she wasn't that smart. I knew there had to be a secondary channel. I began meticulously searching through her app folders, ignoring the standard social media and shopping icons. Finally, buried on the third page inside a folder labeled Utilities, I found an innocent-looking calculator app that required a secondary PIN to open. I guessed her standard banking PIN, and the fake calculator interface immediately dissolved, revealing a hidden secure messaging vault. Inside the vault was a single, massive chat thread with Julian. I opened it and began scrolling back, my eyes scanning the timestamps and dates. The messages didn't start 3 weeks ago when she asked for the open marriage. They started 6 months ago. 6 full months of daily communication, escalating from flirtatious banter to deeply emotional confessions, and finally, to explicit coordination. The timeline of the texts completely obliterated her narrative. She didn't suddenly wake up feeling stifled by traditional constraints. She woke up realizing she was falling in love with her arrogant coworker and needed a convenient way to keep me completely in the dark. My hands shook violently as I finally unlocked the hidden folder containing her darkest secrets. Reading those messages was like repeatedly walking into a moving train. I forced myself to endure every single agonizing detail, taking high-resolution screenshots of the evidence and immediately emailing them to a secure, newly created email address she didn't know existed. I uncovered the exact depth of her absolute betrayal. There were detailed digital receipts for expensive afternoon hotel rooms at the Grand Plaza, charged to a secret credit card I had no idea she possessed. There were explicit, highly graphic photos she had taken of herself in the very bathroom we shared, sent to him while I was sitting just on the other side of the wall. But the most devastating part wasn't the physical infidelity. It was the emotional manipulation. In one extensive message thread dated right before her open marriage pitch, Julian expressed frustration about sneaking around. Chloe replied, "Don't worry, babe. Mark is so traditional and secure. He's basically a golden retriever. I'm going to pitch ethical non-monogamy. I'll use all the therapy buzzwords. He'll feel so guilty about being controlling that he'll eventually cave. Then we can be together openly, and I won't have to give up the house or deal with a messy divorce." I stared at the glowing screen until my eyes physically burned. She didn't respect me. She didn't love me. She viewed me as a pathetic, naive resource to be managed and manipulated for her own comfort. The open marriage was never about exploration or personal growth. It was an incredibly cruel, calculated trick. She wanted to officially sanction an affair she was already deeply committed to. She wanted me to happily finance her lifestyle and maintain her pristine social image while she carried on a full-blown relationship with another man. The sheer entitlement and lack of basic human empathy was staggering. I deleted the forwarded emails from her sent folder, closed the hidden vault, and placed the phone exactly where I found it in her purse. I walked back into our bedroom and looked at her sleeping form. She wanted a retroactive permission slip to completely erase 6 months of calculated, disgusting infidelity. The next morning, after Chloe left for work with a bright, entirely fake smile, I immediately called my best friend, Ben. Ben is 34, incredibly pragmatic, and has always been the voice of absolute reason in my life. I drove to his apartment, handed him a printed stack of the screenshots I had emailed to myself, and completely broke down. I wanted to drive straight to her office, kick down the door, and scream at her in front of Julian and all her colleagues. I wanted to burn her entire carefully constructed reputation to the ground right then and there. But Ben grabbed me by the shoulders and talked me off the dangerous ledge. He forced me to look at the situation completely objectively, stripped of all emotion. "Mark, if you confront her now with pure emotion, she will instantly spin it," Ben explained, his voice calm and steady. "She will tell everyone you illegally hacked her phone, that you are dangerously controlling, and she will file for divorce first, playing the ultimate victim. You have undeniable proof of an affair in an at-fault state. You need to be incredibly smart. You need to hit her where it actually hurts her, her assets, and her perfect image." He was absolutely right. Screaming at her would provide a momentary release, but it would ruin my strategic advantage. I needed to ensure my financial future was completely secure before I dropped the hammer. Ben immediately reached out to a contact and helped me schedule a highly confidential meeting with Ms. Vance. Ms. Vance was known as the most aggressive, ruthless family law attorney in the entire city. She specialized in high-asset divorces and absolutely despised manipulative spouses. When I walked into her sleek, intimidating downtown office and presented the printed evidence of the hidden credit cards, the 6-month affair timeline, and the malicious intent behind the open marriage coercion, Ms. Vance smiled a cold, terrifying smile. We were going to build an ironclad legal trap that she would never see coming. Working with Ms. Vance was like watching a master surgeon carefully dissect a completely diseased organ. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a terrifying double life. At home, I played the role of the supportive, evolving husband. I bought 2 books on ethical non-monogamy, leaving them prominently displayed on my nightstand to maintain the absolute illusion that I was actively working through my insecurities. Chloe was absolutely thrilled. She praised my emotional maturity and happily began planning what she called her first sanctioned exploratory date. Meanwhile, behind the closed doors of Ms. Vance's sleek law office, I was quietly and methodically separating my entire existence from hers. Because we lived in a state that heavily penalized documented infidelity, and because I had absolute proof of her secret credit cards intentionally hiding marital assets, MS. Vance drafted a devastatingly one-sided separation agreement. I quietly moved half of our joint savings into a private, individual account. I gathered all the original deeds, vehicle titles, and sensitive tax documents, locking them securely in a safety deposit box that she didn't even know existed. MS. Vance drafted an airtight petition for dissolution of marriage, citing egregious infidelity, emotional abuse, and financial manipulation, attaching the printed screenshots of her texts with Julian as official Exhibit A. The contrast between my 2 realities was absolutely staggering. Chloe was cheerfully shopping for new lingerie online, completely convinced that she had successfully manipulated me into funding her double life. She would kiss my cheek in the morning, thank me for being such a progressive, evolved partner, and then immediately text Julian to coordinate their upcoming weekend getaway. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to physically gag every time she touched me. I became an absolute master of emotional detachment, focusing entirely on the impending legal execution. While she was busy planning her romantic getaway, I was quietly dismantling our entire life. The level of absolute illusion Chloe maintained during her final week in our home was genuinely terrifying to witness. Having seemingly secured my blessing for her exploration, she stopped hiding her excitement. She officially announced that she was going on a weekend trip to a boutique vineyard a few hours away. She casually framed it as a wellness retreat, where she would happen to be meeting a new connection. She was incredibly arrogant, genuinely believing that her therapy buzzwords had completely neutralized my basic common sense. She spent hours in front of the bedroom mirror, trying on expensive new outfits, practically vibrating with the anticipation of finally being with Julian without having to look over her shoulder. The psychological warfare was intense. She repeatedly went out of her way to thank me for my boundless emotional intelligence. "I just feel so deeply connected to you right now, Mark," she said one evening over dinner, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "By letting me pursue my authentic truth, you are proving that our foundation is absolutely unbreakable. This weekend is going to bring so much positive energy back into our own dynamic." I stared into her eyes, marveling at the absolute sociopathic ease with which she delivered the lies. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively enjoying the sick thrill of making me a willing participant in my own ultimate humiliation. I nodded slowly, offering her a supportive, tight-lipped smile. I told her I just wanted her to be happy and fully realized. Internally, I was counting down the hours until the trap completely snapped shut. Everything was perfectly aligned. The divorce papers were finalized, signed, and waiting inside a thick manila envelope hidden securely in my home office. My finances were completely locked down. Ben was on standby to come over the moment she left, ready to help me change the locks on the front doors. Her fake gratitude made me sick, but I forced myself to smile and play along. The night of her big date finally arrived, and the tension in the house was absolutely electric. Chloe had taken the entire afternoon off from work to prepare. When she finally emerged from the master bathroom, she was dressed to the absolute nines. She wore a stunning, fitted designer dress. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she radiated a toxic, overwhelming confidence. She looked incredibly beautiful, and for a split second, a sharp pang of the old grief hit my chest. But then I remembered the horrific text messages, the hidden credit cards, and the absolute lack of respect she had for my humanity. The grief instantly vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating focus. It was time to execute the final stage of the plan. I walked into the bedroom and offered to help her pack the last few items into her expensive overnight bag. She smiled brightly, tossing me her makeup bag and a pair of heels. "You are literally the best husband in the world, Mark. Thank you so much for being so incredibly supportive of my journey," she cooed, checking her flawless reflection in the mirror one last time. I zipped up the overnight bag, feeling the heavy weight of the finality in my hands. The staging was absolutely perfect. She was at the absolute peak of her arrogance, entirely convinced that she had won the ultimate prize. I carried her bag out to the main foyer, placing it gently by the front door next to her car keys. She followed me out, spraying a final mist of expensive perfume into the air. She reached out to give me a lingering, incredibly fake hug goodbye. I accepted the embrace, my arms stiff, feeling absolutely nothing but cold resolve for the woman currently pressing against my chest. I pulled back, looked her dead in the eyes, and told her I had one last thing to give her before she left for her weekend of authentic exploration. I handed her the overnight bag, knowing she would never sleep in this house again. I stepped into my adjacent home office, retrieved the heavy, sealed manila envelope from the top drawer of my desk, and walked back into the foyer. Chloe was standing by the door, her car keys dangling from her fingers, looking slightly confused but mostly just eager to leave. "What's this? Did you print out the directions to the vineyard?" she asked playfully, reaching out to take the thick envelope from my hands. "Something like that," I replied, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "It's the absolute final step in your journey of personal growth. You should probably open it before you go." Chloe smiled, applying a final touch of her favorite lipstick using the hallway mirror, and then casually slid her manicured finger under the seal of the envelope. She pulled out the thick stack of legal documents. I watched her eyes casually scan the bold, black text at the very top of the first page. It read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Below that, the specific legal filings outlining egregious marital infidelity and financial fraud. And pinned directly behind the primary document was a high-resolution, full-color printout of her hidden text messages with Julian, detailing the exact 6-month timeline of her disgusting affair. The physical transformation was instantaneous and absolutely devastating to watch. The color completely and entirely drained from her face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost. The expensive designer purse slipped from her shoulder, crashing loudly onto the hardwood floor. Her jaw dropped open, and her eyes darted frantically from the undeniable proof of her betrayal up to my completely stone-cold face. She tried to speak, to deploy her usual therapy buzzwords, but only a pathetic, choked gasp escaped her throat. The arrogant smirk completely vanished as she stared down at the undeniable proof of consequence. The absolute panic that instantly consumed Chloe was biblical. She completely dropped the enlightened, evolved persona, instantly reverting to a terrified, desperate child. "Mark, wait. Please, this isn't what it looks like. You don't understand. I can explain everything," she stammered, tears instantly ruining her perfectly applied makeup. She lunged forward, trying to grab my arm, but I took a sharp step back, refusing to let her touch me. "I understand perfectly, Chloe," I said coldly. "I understand that you have been sleeping with Julian for 6 months. I understand that you tried to weaponize my love to secure a retroactive hall pass. You wanted an open marriage? Congratulations. You are now completely single and free to explore whatever you want. Get out of my house." She fell to her knees in the foyer, sobbing hysterically, begging me to let her cancel the trip and talk it out. I simply opened the front door, grabbed her overnight bag, and tossed it onto the front porch. I told her that Ms. Vance would handle all future communication, and if she did not leave my property immediately, I would call the police. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, she stumbled out the door. The moment it clicked shut, Ben pulled into the driveway, and we immediately changed every single lock on the house. Over the next few days, Chloe attempted a massive, desperate smear campaign, calling our mutual friends and crying that I was a controlling monster who had completely blindsided her with a divorce. It lasted exactly 24 hours. I authorized Ms. Vance to legally release the timeline of her cheating and the screenshots of her malicious intent to our immediate circle to correct the false narrative. The fallout was incredibly swift and absolutely brutal. Her friends were disgusted by the sheer manipulation. Her carefully crafted reputation burned to the ground the moment our friends saw the receipts. The divorce proceedings were incredibly fast and entirely brutal. Faced with the overwhelming, undeniable evidence of her hidden credit cards and documented intent to commit financial fraud through emotional manipulation, Chloe's lawyer heavily advised her to accept our initial terms. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and every single asset I had secured prior to handing her the papers. She walked away with exactly what she brought into the marriage, which was virtually nothing. To make matters even more satisfying, the moment the reality of a messy, public divorce became apparent, Julian immediately abandoned her. He wanted a fun, secret office affair with a married woman, not the heavy burden of a ruined life. It has been 6 months since I dropped that manila envelope onto the kitchen counter. The house is incredibly quiet, but it is a peaceful, healing kind of quiet. I have spent the last few months working intensely on myself, rebuilding the self-esteem she tried so desperately to systematically destroy. I learned a profound and painful lesson about the true nature of boundaries and the terrifying reality of covert manipulation. People who truly love you will never weaponize your insecurities or use therapy speak to mask their own disgusting, selfish betrayals. If you are ever in a situation where your partner suddenly changes the fundamental rules of your relationship and tries to make you feel crazy for resisting, do not ignore your gut instinct. Do not let them gaslight you into abandoning your own reality. Dig deep, find the undeniable truth, and protect yourself with absolute, ruthless precision. I survived the darkest emotional betrayal of my life, and I emerged stronger, sharper, and completely unbroken. Never compromise your own core values for someone who refuses to respect your basic boundaries.